Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 186 of the podcast. In this episode, I talk with Dale Hudson. He's back on the podcast, and we talk about an annual gathering that Dale does with children's ministry leaders from some of the largest churches in the country. They get together every year. They talk about what's working, what's not working, what they share ideas, resources, things like that. And so we kind of get like a sneak peek into that annual gathering. But we also talk about right now what churches are doing with online children's ministry, a conversation that we keep having in the season that we're in with coronavirus and churches not meeting. So I just ask him what his take is on that, what he's seen, what's going on out there. He has a post where he's written some about that too. So we talk about that. We also talk about his new book, Leading Well in Children's Ministry. As usual, we can get all the links and notes and all of that from nickblevins.com/episode 186. Our friends at Serve HQ are sponsoring this episode of the podcast. You know them probably from Trained Up, but as we talked about last week, they have a resource called Huddle Up, which is an app software that you can use online or in your phone, helps you stop using clunky and unsafe communication tools in ministry. And with this new tool, Huddle Up, your email and text announcements and all those things can live alongside your team chats in one unified platform that's just for churches. So with ease and accountability built into it, you can kind of gather all of those different communication mediums that you probably use already, text, email, maybe Facebook. Some churches might use Slack. Things like that, and you can bring it all into one simple tool. One of my favorite things about it is the history too. You know, you send an email, whatever happens to that, who knows after they read it, text, there's a thread there, but being able to have all that in one place, accessible on an app or in your computer, and that it lives there, you can come back to it. Imagine sending a message to your volunteers that week and then opening that again. When you're going to talk to them that weekend about whatever's going on, you can refer back to what you had posted in there. So you can check that out at nickblevins.com/huddleup. And let's go ahead now and jump into my conversation with Dale Hudson about this gathering that he has annually and what they're learning. What was the common denominators, the conversations there? I think you will probably not be surprised to see that it's a lot of the same things you're probably thinking about and that we talk about a lot on this podcast. But we also talk about his take on online Kidmin and his new book. So let's jump into my conversation with Dale. Well, it's great to have Dale Hudson back on the podcast again. Welcome back, Dale.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, give us an update. I mean, it's probably been 2 years plus, maybe 3, I don't even know, since you were on the podcast before. And we talked about your book, If Disney Ran Your Children's Ministry, which was a lot of fun. Yeah. But lots have changed, so kind of give us an update on what's going on in your life.
Yeah, so I'm staying busy, traveling, speaking, consulting, coaching, and so forth in kids ministry. Of course, I was in the local church as a children's pastor for 28 years, and I'd always had a heart for the Big C church as well. And so it was just kind of the right time to transition. So I've transitioned over full time to helping the Big C church. And so the virus has affected us a little bit. I had lots of events scheduled for this spring that I've had to move to the fall. So I've, felt the ramifications of that just like everyone else has. But yeah, we're having a great time and love traveling and ministering at churches. And hopefully when this blows over a little bit, we'll be able to get back out there and help some churches.
Yeah, and there's lots of people affected by it, but certainly anybody that it depends on travel or public speaking or live events. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're more so impacted. I've seen like John Acuff tweet about that living in Nashville. It was like a whole town of people who mostly do those kinds of things. Yeah. And that's a big impact there. Let's talk about though, as we're getting started online kids ministry and the shifts and the pivots and the ways that churches are adapting to lead during this season that we're in where we're not gathering in person. What have you seen? What are some things you're thinking about? What's going across your mind it's only been a few weeks now as we're recording this that people are doing that, but what have you seen that's been interesting?
I think it's interesting that before this, maybe I obviously don't know every church in the country, but I knew of very few churches that were doing children's ministry online. Obviously the adult service was happening, but I probably could name just on one hand of the churches I knew that were putting live teaching or recorded teaching online for kids. And I think this has been a huge shift that most of the churches I know they are having kids programming, on the website live and then on demand. Churches of all sizes and churches of all different communities are tapping into that. So I think it's kind of forced us to shift toward, doing a lot more online stuff for kids, which there's always the tension there, right? We want them to be at church in person so they can connect with their small group leader, so they can, look somebody in the eye, so they can be prayed over. But there's a lot of stuff happening online. There's prayer meetings happening. I've seen children's pastors that are given certain times for their kids to be online with their parents, and then they would pray with them and do just all kind of fun games or activities or teaching or so forth. But that's the biggest thing I have noticed is that church online is a real thing for kids ministry now, whereas before it wasn't.
Yeah, you're right. I can only name a couple. And even then, I think I'd only heard of it. I don't think I'd ever really seen it as much. There's some churches, I think of like a Life Church, where you can find their content online.
Right.
Which is, a lot of what churches are doing now. What have you seen anything in terms of the different ways churches are doing it? Because I know some of the conversations that I've been having and people ask questions about is like, okay, well, we're putting our content online and for parents to use it. And then there's some church, I know somebody who mentioned that thought this was an interesting idea. They're doing like Saturday morning live kids ministry, almost in the model of Saturday morning cartoons for kids, back to that kind of thing, thinking that then Sunday could be about the main service and parents wouldn't have to lead as much of it, right? Because it's there live. And then there are people doing straight up live, Sunday morning, boom, this time. I mean, what have you seen out there? What are your thoughts on it? What do you think is a better angle?
Well, what I've seen is that most churches do that they have a host maybe that's live and impression, and then whatever curriculum they're using, they play that, and then they kick back, and they also are putting worship on there. They're putting your worship videos that have maybe someone leading motions and stuff. They're putting that on there. They're putting some live conversation with somebody from their church, and if they're using a curriculum. Example would be Orange. They have the video teaching segments. They would put that on there, and then they would wrap back up with some live talking and activities there, at that church. I think that's another thing. I had one guy last week. I'd written an article about this. He put a comment that the only thing he was worried about was copyright issues. And so I don't know if the churches have thought through copyright issues. That they need to get permission. I'm assuming from the curriculum companies to put that online. But that's what I'm seeing, just all kind of creative stuff. Kids ministry is one of the most creative ministries in the church, right? I mean, and I've just seen lots of creativity come out, and I've seen lots of different, like you said, just a myriad of different things people are doing, from live services to on-demand services. Obviously, I see a lot of churches that are putting stuff for parents online and encouraging parents even to sit down and watch the kids service, with their kids at home. So I would just say the biggest thing I think come out of it is just a lot of innovation. It's really cool to see the creativity and innovation in kids ministry and how quickly they were able to shift for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I don't know, we haven't really done this, but I've seen other leaders trying to do like Zoom calls with kids. And we do something like that with our student ministry. So middle school, high school is doing that for groups, and even for kind of like a gathering they're all doing together. And it was funny that one leader, I know, she was talking about how they did it and it went pretty well with like the 4th and 5th graders. It was a little rough with the kindergarten, 1st graders, but it's like everybody's doing it. I mean, my kids, my son's in 1st grade. He now, starting this week, has a daily live Zoom call at 2:00.
Wow.
And then even our daughter, who's only 4, was part of like a Tiny Tots co-op preschool thing. And they're doing every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, just a 30-minute Zoom call. And of course, parents got to help a lot. There's a lot of mute all going on, but it's interesting, that young age, they're, still finding ways to connect, and churches are doing the same, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I think, Nick, one thing that we talked about, or I don't want to use the word concerned, but just looking at is before all this happened, we want to see families there in person at church. And there was this tension of, we want to have great online stuff, but we don't want that to become a substitute for being, at a church where you can connect with your small group leader, where you can be loved and be prayed for and cared over in person. So I think this is a conversation that is going to, and another thing too is, can churches sustain this long term? Kids ministry, that's a lot to come up with and to produce, every week, whether it's just just the cut and the paste of the video segments. can we sustain this long term? I think churches will have to find a process and ways that they can do this, for however long it lasts. And I think some children's ministries may keep doing it after this is over. Maybe this was the push that we needed to do stuff online. But do you feel that, do you know what I'm saying? The tension of, man, we want you to be there. Because I've heard of parents getting up on Sunday morning going, yeah, man, I think let's just stay at the house and watch it online. We don't feel like getting dressed today and having to drive to the church building. So we're just gonna stay home today. That's the reality. But long term, I wonder, what effect that's going to have in our children's ministries. We know that they need to be with the caring leader. They need to, be shepherded and guided and have that personal contact. I believe is really, really important. I think it's one of the top, things that we need to do for the kids is to have that live interaction and prayer and so forth with them. What have you seen in your ministry as far as that goes?
We've seen we're tracking how many views people are using it. I would say we don't have a good handle, especially now when we're recording this.
Yeah.
How much it's getting used. You and I were talking before we recorded that we have had on our main services when we stream online, we do have, push people to fill out kind of like a connection card, a CCC card is what we call it. Yeah. Similar to when we were in service. And because of that, we know 1.8 people are watching per connection. We don't know that with kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for every view, how many is it? Now, I think at some point we'll probably do a survey because, with how long it seems like we're going to be in this and maybe figure that out. But then kind of what you're saying, and I don't know what to think of this yet, but I've heard other leaders say, are we going to make it so comfortable that when we come back to meeting, in person, there will be even more of a draw to be at home? Because if you think about it, for a long time, if your church did live online services really well, you would still been compelled to go if you had kids. Yeah. Because you couldn't get that live online. True. And now there could be a sense if we do both, okay, we're going to make it, in person and online. I could see that, there's a tendency to maybe not go live, as much in person. I don't know. It's hard to tell now. And I think when we do get back to meeting in person, it'll probably trickle. It's not gonna be like, bang, everybody's here on the next Sunday. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So I don't know. It'll be interesting for sure.
Do you think that, to me, as you're saying that, I believe that the biggest factor is that personal connection, that kids need to be known and loved and cared for and prayed over. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know if they can get that online as effectively. Maybe they can.
I don't think so either. And even if they could, even if you were come close, it's because you'd be doing Zoom calls separate with a leader. Yeah. Right? So then you're streaming some kind of content. Plus you're putting kids in front of a leader virtually. Well then, and you're not going to get leaders to do that. Yeah. I mean, not most leaders. You're not going to get them to do that live at a place on Sunday and then again later for people online. You know what I mean? So I guess I haven't even put too much thought into it. It feels like it's just still in the middle and just figuring things out. But in my head, there's part of me that's like, I want to keep a lot of the stuff we're doing when we move back to in person. Yeah. But I probably wouldn't want to have that. I'd still want that relationship with the leader there at the facility, in person, because it is the best version of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anything else will be less. So I don't know.
We have the verse in Hebrews that says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. And I guess you could say online is assembling together. Yeah. But I think that when that was written, obviously there was no internet when that was written. Sure. Yeah. But I think it does emphasize getting together, as a church family in person together. Yeah. Because you need somebody to hold you accountable as too, right? Can't hold you accountable and to know when you're not there and to pray over you and shake your hand and look in your eyes and say, you matter to God, you matter to us. I don't think you can get that online. I think it's just something too personal that can't just happen over a computer. And I could be wrong. There may be ways to do that.
Yeah. And it's kind of like you can do a lot. I mean, I think of my men's group is meeting on Zoom calls now. Yeah. I would say it feels 85% the same, but it's not 100%. There's definitely something missing there. Yeah. And the more longer it goes, I think the more that would be missing. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And for kids, it's interesting because for most churches, if you're doing some type of small groups or intentional community with kids, it's when they attend on Sunday. Whereas a lot of adults, it might be another night of the week, and so it's not that different. You can experience that live online, but then you got this connection part over here. For kids, they're usually one in the same hour or same hour and a half, whatever it is. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. it'll be interesting to see how things track, and we'll just have to be willing to be ready to change and move forward as we have to.
Yeah, and we'll link in the show notes. I'll put a link because you have a post about online church services for kids have arrived, and you got some samples too, which is cool.
Yeah,
so people can see
from
some
several
examples.
churches.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that, the thing we wanted to talk about to have you on the podcast, which we talked about before all this, came about, was you gathered together a bunch of leaders from larger churches, the children's ministry leaders, every year, right? And you always learn some things from that. You have great conversations together. And so I just wanted to sneak peek, get special access to those conversations for everybody listening to hear what you talked about, what came up, what are leaders wrestling with, the fact that they're large churches. Yeah, there's probably some things that maybe aren't as relevant to other churches, but I bet most of it is. I bet 80% or more of what you talked about fits all churches. So tell us about that gathering, and then let's talk about some of the things that stood out from it.
Yeah, so I started the gathering, this past one was our fifth one, I believe. So I started it when I was still there in South Florida, and just gathered together 30 of the children's leaders from the largest churches in the country just to get in the room. It wasn't a conference. It was more of a discussion, just to get in the room and share, here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's what we're facing, what trends are we seeing, and so forth. And so this was our fifth one. We held this one out at Saddleback Church. It was their ministry's 40th anniversary. So it was really fun to be there and see and celebrate with them on their 40th anniversary as a church. But yeah, we got in the room and we just talk. And, a few of the things we take good notes at the conversation. And so I'll hit a few of these here. If anybody would like the notes that we type everything that's said pretty much. Nick, I'm sure there'll be a way that you can get that to your listeners. We'll be glad to pass that along to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm sure people love that.
Yeah. So one of the in the second session, the first session, churches kind of just share what's going well, what's not going well. I'll skip on past that, but they can read that in the notes. But session 2, one of the big topics of discussion was attendance frequency. How often are kids and families showing up for church? And somebody, Saddleback, friend Sean Hyde, he's leading the Saddleback kids now. He said that for them, it's 1.25 times a month. So really just about once a month, the kids at Saddleback are showing up. There's a core that's there every week, maybe they're serving and whatnot, but the average family is about once a month. And so just talking through what's causing that, what are some ways we can get people to be more faithful, bring their kids on, because think about it, once a month, man, that's 25% of the teaching. That's all they're missing. They're missing 75% of the teaching. Yeah. One of my concerns is that we're going to put out a generation of kids that are very shallow when it comes to doctrine. Sure. When it comes to those things, that may not have a faith that's going to stand up, when they're in college, when the professor gets up and says there is no God and I can prove it. Can you prove it? Those type things, they're missing 75% of the lessons. We've got to find another way or encourage them to be faithful so they can have a strong faith. I grew up in church. We went three times a week: Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, maybe Friday night was youth activity. Yeah. And I know there's a pushback sometimes about being there that much, but we didn't know our Bibles, and we didn't know the doctrines of the faith. So that's a big concern right now among all churches. I'm sure not just large churches, but all churches are kind of feeling that tension. When I was in Florida there, I pulled the average. Our average family was about the same thing, about once a month. We had a core that was there every week, but the average family was there about once a month. So, one of the things, just looking at the notes here, several churches had mentioned that sports has become a big deterrent for faithful church attendance. You've got, it used to be, I love sports. I played baseball and football and basketball as a kid growing up, but I didn't play on Sunday. Mm-hmm. There was just kind of in the culture, even the world culture, was just kind of built in that we're not going to have this little league games on Sunday. But that's changed now. It's no big deal to have games on Sunday. Then you get into the travel teams that will be gone for 4 or 5 weeks in a row traveling to different places. There's been a few Time magazine front page articles about that, from a secular standpoint, that are we pushing this too far? Have we turned kids' sports into pro sports? It's just insane how much that the sports has pulled some families away from church. Do you see that in your church? Do you see what's your average? Do you know what your average attendance is? Not your average attendance, but your average time the families are there each month.
Yeah, for kids specifically, it's stayed around 1.6. But I wonder, so that's a little higher, than the 1.25 or whatever.
Yeah.
I also wonder too sometimes, like the data nerd side of me wants to know exactly how they measured it. Like when we measure it, I tell you it's 1.6.
Yeah.
I exclude people who came one time.
Right.
In fact, I think I even exclude up to like 2 or 3 times because I'm trying to figure. I think it was like 5. I think it was like if you came less than 5, you're not even factored in here.
Yeah.
Give me because I didn't want people who were checking it up and never became regular attenders, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's not really giving me a picture of average attendance. That's giving me something else. So for us, it was 1.6, but that's after I filtered out those people and sports for sure. I mean, my son is 7 now. He was 5 and was doing lacrosse for the first time. And for whatever reason, it was 11 o'clock Sunday. And I'm like, what? He's 5. And, but you know what it was? It's because all the other older age kids sports took all the fields during the other prime hours that we're used to, Saturday mornings, afternoon, even Sunday afternoon, evening. So that's why they ended up actually 2 different things that he participated in. It worked out because, we have multiple services and he'd come early. And so church was still able to be a priority, but there was a time when they'd have like a special game or something and it'd be right in the middle of the 2 and he just didn't have to go. He just wasn't going to be able to be a part of that because, it's one thing to miss, even to miss certain weeks, it's like, okay. But the idea that like you're going to miss for 12 weeks, for it's hard. And it is more common. We're seeing tons of that. And I do think a lot of it is because it's almost like a lot of things in our world where they divide. There's like no middle ground anymore. There's not a ton of kids that play sports that don't want to, which I feel like was the case when I grew up. Like a lot of kids did. But now, man, it's like the extremes. Either you don't and you don't at all, or you do. And boy, you might be in a club league or, 5 things. There's a more extreme version of it. So we're seeing that for sure.
The Time magazine article that they wrote said that the regular, community little league teams, their participation is actually down. The reason is that kids are going to these travel teams and these, more intense teams. And that's why the average little league team is conference is down. That's the reason. And a lot of parents, I don't want to blame parents. I mean, a lot of them are trying to help their child get ahead. So, a big thing is, hey, if I do this, my kid will have a better chance of getting into a D1 school and play sports. But, the Time magazine article showed that the studies show that really it doesn't make a huge difference as far as somebody getting into a D1 school. That kids are talented as long as they, by a certain age, get involved. They just said it didn't make a huge enough difference to make that a valid point, is what the article said.
Sure. So, yeah. And I can see that, but that is a big focus for sure. Yeah. And it makes sense to me that the rec leagues are getting smaller and the club teams are getting bigger. And around here, I'm in Maryland, lacrosse is huge, soccer is huge. There's lots of things that are big, but certain parts of the state, the parts that make us the highest average income, probably those parts. I mean, it's really big. It's really big. So it's interesting.
Here's some of the. So just some ideas and suggestions that came around the table there that during that discussion is one thing is, they encourage the pastor to speak about it. Encouraging families to be in church and making sure that parents know what really matters. Sports are great. Academic success is good. Financial success is good. But the greatest success is for your kids to love and follow Jesus. So, having your lead pastor or whoever your teaching pastor is to talk about that occasionally can make a big difference. Another thing that was mentioned was child dedication is a key time where you can really invest in parents when their kids are very, very young. So, have a class that parents go through before they dedicate their child. And in that class, spend about, if it's an hour class, spend about 15, 20 minutes explaining what the dedication is and what it represents. The other 30 to 40 minutes spend teaching the parents, here's how to invest in your kids and how to help them grow spiritually. And the church I was at, we started doing that, and I saw a lot of success and fruit from that. That if we felt like we could get those parents young, when their kids are young, and get that in that class and teach them that, and let them just see it, because a lot of them just didn't understand to start with. They were supposed to be the spiritual leader of their child. But if we can plant that seed in their hearts when they have the young kids and the toddlers, the preschoolers, that hopefully that priority will stick with them as they go through elementary and high school. So that was another thing that was mentioned. Just doing things to get the kids more involved. One thing I think that was mentioned also is, the families that are faithful to church are the ones that usually are serving. I think Carrie Newhoff said that the growth now is not going to be from attendance, but from engagement. Mm-hmm. What you need to be looking at, how many families you have engaged in serving. Because think about it, the people that are there faithfully, at least maybe 2 to 3 times a month, they're the people that are serving. Sure. Yeah. If you can get a family involved in serving, then they're going to be there more often. And so, what can you do to get kids and parents serving together? A mom and her daughter maybe greeting together, a father and his son working together in the parking lot. Anything that we can do to get families serving together, we feel like will make a big difference. And I'd even thought about, I didn't implement this, but I thought about going toward the kids angle and telling the kids, hey, we would love you to serve here at the church, and you'll need to serve with your parents. And so talk with your parents about signing up to serve with you. Here's something to put in their hands and see how that goes. I never got to the point to implement that, but I really thought that might be another avenue to get more parents involved in serving, which translates into them being more consistent in their attendance. One church had started putting people in buckets based on their attendance and how often they come. And so they would maybe, if the once a month bucket, they would take a different strategy trying to connect with those parents as they would maybe the 2 to 3 times a month buckets. So that was done.
That's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah.
Because it might just change how you communicate. It might, you might do something different, but even if you don't do something different, you might just talk about it differently.
Yeah. That's so, one. Yeah, it's for true. Just a lot of communication through text and maybe a short video. The parent app, there's a lot of great apps out there for parents right now, connected to curriculum. And so that was a big discussion about the frequency of attendance.
Did you feel like most of them knew? Because I would think, again, I think a lot of church leaders maybe don't even know. Did a lot of them know? Like they already knew?
Knew what?
Like knew what their frequency was. Like they came in.
Yeah.
They did. Yeah.
That's
what I figured.
And it's easy to pull those numbers in kids area, right? Adults, they don't check in.
Yeah.
I think that was the big thing. And another thing question that was asked is home and church strategy. What does it look like to engage parents at home with their kids, discipling their kids? So that was a big discussion. There was different things about different materials and stuff that could be created, but just asking everybody, do you have a church and home strategy of some kind? And if so, what does it look like? What's been working for your ministry? And so I think what we're seeing right now is what they were doing, but it is amped up right now since kids are home and can't get out of their house and can't go worship in person. I think that's amped up a lot.
Sure.
Magnifies what was being done on a smaller scale. Well, now it's an all-out full strategy for that.
It'd be interesting, one thing. So the 1.6 times a month, the 1.25 times a month, like whatever that is, and then mix that with what we're doing now, which is like online church because you can't be there.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my head, there feels like there probably is some kind of combination down the road that would be helpful. Where how do we take what we're doing now, to supplement the 3 times a month you're not there, or the 2.5 times, or whatever it is, but also not make you want to come less. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what the answer to that is, but I would want to give you things that would make you feel like you were still caught up. No different than if you missed a day of school and the teacher gives you this. I'd want that. I wouldn't want it to encourage you to come less. But that's interesting. That's something that makes me think about those two together. Like there's probably some way they can help each other.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing we talked about, one of the sessions was about volunteer teams. And just if you're listening to this and you're a medium to a smaller church, let me encourage you. Every single church needs more volunteers. Everybody around that table, from the largest church in the country, they needed volunteers. And so just know that's a universal need of all churches, no matter what your size is. You're going to always need more volunteers, especially if you're reaching people and growing. But they talked about that. They talked about students, getting students involved in serving. At Willow Creek, just to throw this out there, at Willow Creek, 65% of their volunteers are 18 and under.
Wow.
Is the stat I was given from the guy at Willow Creek.
That's awesome.
So that involved, connecting with your youth pastor and partnering with him to get the kids involved in serving. Because we know that if kids will get involved in serving, there's a greater percentage will turn out and follow Jesus, stay engaged for the rest of their life. Is a big, big deal. So I know a few churches that are, this is another trend that's happened is and I'll say a lot, several churches I'm watching, they've moved all of their student ministry off of Sunday. They have no student ministry on Sunday, at least not on Sunday morning. And they are encouraging, and as part of their strategy is to get their students serving on Sunday morning. I was at one of the churches. Actually, they're the largest church in the country right now. And I was there visiting one weekend, and I noticed there was a group of teenager students sitting in a circle over in a corner. And I said, what are they doing? He said, she said that that's a small group of teenagers. They do their small group lesson for 30 or 40 minutes. And then they all go as a small group and they serve in kids ministry. And so some churches are being intentional about that, about getting kids involved in serving, but that's a big, big trend. We know what a huge thing they can make. Another church is doing the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. They're doing a Bible study with them 15 minutes, and then they go serve together. And so that was the big thing for that. Students having a commitment card for students, saying that they have to be plugged into a student ministry life group. They still have to attend student ministry, because I know that's a lot of the student pastors may say, well, man, if they start serving in kids ministry, I'm going to lose my influence over them because they're not going to be there. But just, coming up with a strategy that you work very closely with your student pastor, that if a teenager is going to be serving, then they have to, commit to be involved in student ministry service and activities and so forth at the same time.
Yeah. It's interesting. That prompted me, like that percentage you said was a Willow was like 65%. Yeah. I was thinking the last time I knew, and it's been a while, that I looked at that percentage for us, it was 25% of our kids' team were students. But I just looked right now, it's 30 right now, 30%. Wow. So it's up a little bit. I think it dipped maybe at one point and then came back. But it was one of those things where if we've always not had student ministry on Sunday morning. So, we don't know at this church. So we don't know any other, reality. But I can't imagine losing 30% of our volunteers because student ministry met on Sunday morning. Like we feel it. I've said that before on the podcast. We feel it when they do a weekend retreat and they're all going, and there goes a third of the team or whatever. It's like we got to scramble. Yeah, it's interesting.
So I do think it's key is for the children's person to reach out to the student ministry person and make it a part of their strategy.
Yeah, and another conversation. I don't know if you guys talked about this, but it's like as a person who is in both worlds, I want students serving. In fact, that's a metric for us, we want at least half of our students in serving in ministry roles. And so like, that's what I want. Now, if I was a student pastor and, working with a kids pastor, you do want like a cooperation too. Cause I don't know that I'd want a kid serving and not go into student ministry. You know what I mean? It's like, I want both. Yeah. And then if I'm only picking one, that's hard. You know what I mean? That's hard. So
it is.
It's just a good conversation to have though, cause they should feed each other.
It's accountable.
So student person helps the student serve, and kids person helps make sure they're going to student ministry in a group. Yeah, so
because I'm sure you noticed over the years that sometimes if there's a student that doesn't connect really well socially in the student ministry, that maybe they'll gravitate toward kids ministry because they feel like they don't fit in or their personality.
Yeah.
So we're being intentional about getting them to stay involved in student ministries for sure. One other church had talked about, one of the leaders that was there had talked about. They feel like that the age where we lose kids is shifted down. Even age 10 to 12 is the key time that many churches are losing their kids between the age of 10 and 12. And so how do we engage those older kids in our ministry, those preteens? How can we keep them engaged? How can we help them successfully transition over to middle school ministry? and so there was concern there that we do a good job of that. So they thought that was important.
That is important, and I wonder. You would know this because you've served in some large churches and you're connected with leaders like this. My impression has been with friends I know, people that have on the podcast, in the student ministry world, a lot of times the goal is like 10% of your total attendance is in students. So a church of 1,000 has 100 students,
right?
10,000 has 1,000 students. Yeah. My experience though has been the larger a church gets, the less likely they are to come near that. But kids ministry, they do. Like I see whatever number you want to pick for kids ministry, I see that being, churches get larger and they still can reach a very high percentage of their attendance as kids. Student ministry, not so much. And I wonder if that, I'm sure every church feels that, but I wonder if you feel it more if your church is bigger. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, that definitely could be for sure. And another person said that they connected with student ministry and they sat down and just had a great conversation about what do you want us to hand you coming out of kids ministry? What do you want? Where do you want the kids to be spiritual when we shift them over to you and getting that feedback from student ministry? Here's what we want the kids to know and believe and understand, and the character we want them to have, and so forth. So the kids ministry is so important. They emphasize that the kids ministry is so important to student ministry as well. Let's see. I was just looking down through the notes here for anything else. A lot of discussion about lifestyles. Who is allowed to serve in kids ministry? Who is not allowed to serve in kids ministry? As it relates to the LGBTQ, community. Some of that was discussed for that. And that's something obviously each church has to kind of decide for themselves. But I think the majority took the approach that I know when I was leading a church with a lot of volunteers, that our policy was if you want to serve in kids ministry, one of the questions that you'll be asked on the interview form is, are you sexually, pure inside of marriage between a man and a woman? Mm-hmm. And so that was a question that would be asked. If the answer was no, then there was other places in the church they might be able to serve, but not with the kids, because anybody that's with the kids is influencing the kids. And that's not trying to be intolerant, or that's just, we would be across the board and say, if you're living in adultery, then that means you need to not serve in kids ministry. If you're single and you're involved sexually, then that means you don't need to serve in kids ministry until we get that taken care of and settled out. Mm-hmm. So that was a big source of conversation. That obviously at each church, that's the pastor and the executive team obviously has to weigh in on that. They're going to be the one that makes the final decision about what the policies are for that. Yeah. There's a few kids ministries that are walking with kids through the transgender thing. That's mm-hmm. something that several of the churches are walking with. I know the church I was at, we had some kids that we had to help. We helped walk through that with their parents and so forth. One of the questions, is there anything else you want to hit on that before we? No,
that's good.
We went around and said, what are you dreaming about to everybody? There's just a few of them, raise up more leaders, become a better vision caster and a storyteller, help parents win. Don't make them feel guilty, but make them help them win. Keeping things simple, make the ministry more relational and personal. Anyways, there's a long list there. The notes I send you will have all those different things that people wanted to see, were dreaming about for their ministry.
Yeah, I'm curious to see more of what those things are. And it's interesting to hear, like all the things you just shared, most of them, I do feel like every church has experienced, you know what I mean? Like those are the same kinds of conversations that we've had on this podcast. Yeah. Or, I've had with a leader on the phone. It's just, I guess there's so much to church that is just universal.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't matter location, size, type, method,
for sure.
All that stuff,
One thing that was mentioned also, that as children's ministry leaders, we have in the past, we have kind of depended upon adult ministry to do parenting seminars, but we're seeing that children's ministries are starting to step up and say, we'll be glad to help with the parenting seminars, and we want to be a part of that and speak into that. So that was something I thought was pretty interesting. Some of them are doing weekend retreats for their preteens. They take them off on a weekend retreat and really pour into them and spiritually, and helping kids learn God's word. There's a lot of other random stuff that people talked about, little things that they're doing, and I'll pass those along in the notes to you. But a lot of good stuff about that, systems and processes and onboarding volunteers, training volunteers, that type of stuff. But
yeah, that'd be good. People would love to see that.
Yeah,
And,
so
if there's
I'll pass those
specific
along.
ideas, they can just take them and apply it or not. Like that's really good.
Yeah.
Well,
So
before
those are a few of the trends that are being discussed out there and talked about.
Yeah, and in some ways, to me, it's like encouraging that everybody's dealing with the same stuff. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So if they find out answers, let us know.
That's right.
Because we'd love to hear whatever they got going on. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But before we go, I want to ask you about your new book, Leading Well in Children's Ministry. Last time you were on, we talked about if Disney ran your children's ministry. So, give us a sense of what this book is about and the focus, maybe even how they're different or similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this book is, Lead Well. It's about leadership. It's the same in kids ministry as every other business or ministry. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And so we took that declaration and said, how can we lead well in kids ministry? So there's chapters that starts out talking about how do you lead yourself well, which, your biggest challenge is the person you look at in the mirror every day. How do you lead yourself well? How do you lead parents well? How do you, this one would really be helpful to a lot of people now, how to lead through challenges well.
Yeah.
How do you lead through challenges? Here's another chapter I think that's really will be helpful to a lot of people is how do you lead up well? How do you lead up to your pastor or to whoever you report to? How do you lead up to them and influence them? Which I think that's a really important chapter.
It's a big question. People, lots of those in our world, in family ministry, you see that question a lot. Yeah.
There's another chapter about leading multi-site well. We know there's so many churches now that are multi-site. So there's 10 chapters there, 300 and some pages of stuff I've learned by making mistakes. And so they can get that on my website, buildingchildrensministry.com, or if you want a shorter URL, it's buildingkidministry.com, buildingkidmin.com, either one.
Cool. Yeah, and I was going to ask where to get it because I know, you also have relevantchildrensministry.com and buildingchildrensministry.com, both names, and you can get the book.
And they're on Amazon as well. All the books are on Amazon as well if they want to go there in paperback and ebook formats.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking time to come back on the podcast and meet with those leaders every year. I'm sure is helpful. There's no doubt. My favorite, helps in ministry have been just conversations with other leaders just like this. I think that's encouraging. You hear ideas, you realize you're not alone. So I'm sure that group is a really good thing. And I'm glad we could get like a peek into it, from you doing that. And 40 years for Saddleback. That's just cool. Such an influential church,
Yes.
That's a great thing. So how can people connect with you other than, the websites, and we'll link that stuff in the show notes?
Hey, I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, all the regular social media channels. They can do that or through the website. Either one, I'll get right back to them.
Cool. All right. Well, Dale, thanks for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you, Nick, for everything you're doing to encourage and lift up the leaders across the country. Thank you for the impact that you have and that your podcast has.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You bet.
Well, it was great to talk with Dale again. Love the work that he does with churches and the work he did leading in children's ministry, and then the work he continues to do helping out churches. A few things I thought of coming out of that conversation are, one, for you to go figure out what the frequency of attendance is at your church. And right now, if you're listening to this when it comes out, you're not meeting. But you can go back and search when you were meeting this year earlier, how often did kids attend? 1.2 times a month? Was it 1.6? What is that number? I think that matters a lot. And I love that idea about putting families into buckets almost to communicate with them differently. So that'd be the second action step, would be after you know who is attending, how often, start to group them. Is it 2 groups, 3 groups? Don't make 8 groups, but maybe 2 or 3 groups, and then communicate to them differently, especially as you're looking ahead to when we're going to be back to meeting again. Then how can you communicate with those different groups in different ways that are unique to them? And then third, have a conversation with your student pastor about students serving in ministry. Again, just something you're going to hold off on for now, but can you build the foundation if that's not already happening? Maybe it is, but you don't know what percentage of them serve, how many of them serve in children's ministry, how many more could serve. Like, that's a lot of things that you could be thinking about and working on right now. So like I said in the beginning, you can get all the links and notes and all that at nickblevins.com/episode 186. I'm going to email out the notes that he talked about that they took from the gathering. So make sure you subscribe to the email. If you go to the show notes there's a little form where you can subscribe. every week I send an email about that podcast episode, as well as some kind of extra resource or bonus thing that you can download that's related to it. So again, at nickblevins.com/episode 186 is where you can sign up for that. Don't forget to check out Huddle Up at nickblevins.com/huddle up. That's one of the Serve HQ products. Again, you're probably familiar with Trained Up. Huddle Up is a newer resource of theirs, allowing you to communicate with your team, keep it safe, keep it accountable, keep that history there. Really great thing. So check that out, nickblevins.com/huddle up. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.